there, Jesus. How you doing, buddy? How you doing? Is that a... Does that have a... Yeah, it looks a little scratched. I'll have to get that fixed sometime. We'll fix you sometime. We will. Yeah. Be gone! Be gone! Cancer Christ. God is violence. Well, I was never going to get monetized given my current situation, and yeah, I don't think I'm too worried about that right now. If I'm reviewing this thing, so yeah. But yeah. I actually do have a lot to say. It's going to be a long video with this one. I might be thinking of making a longer video in the future involving this to some of my friends. But as someone who is genuinely a cradled Catholic, is aware of the 99 bullshit, also aware of the unfortunate thing with Sinead O'Connor, may she unfortunately, may she rest in peace. Yeah, despite what some Catholics may say about that, even though she really wasn't wrong given what happened in 99. And that's has something to do with how it being around Northeast region. So yeah, that's also, this is a band that's based in LA. Given one of the tracks on here is called God Hates Cops. Yes, I see why, given LA cops are technically no different from the gangs they are up against in LA, yet alone most of California. Also, given California is a very blue state, some of the leanings of the actual Church of Cancer Christ, this is actually St. Anthony and the Snake Boys, as we call our snake people, I guess, depending on who you ask. Like Charles and Metal says snake people, but I read on their Spotify that it's even though I really just listen to them through like YouTube Music or whatever, but because I just prefer the output of the player on that one. So yeah, this is an interesting, there's some legitimate beliefs towards some of this, but also some of this is really more of a satire on a lot of more of modern Christianity, towards the modern current state of Christianity, and anything somewhat related towards Christian nationalism, and more than likely those that are somewhat for that idea, and probably leaning somewhat as Christian conservatives, which technically, and they even consider themselves a real Christian metal band. Not willing to acknowledge any band like Theocracy that actually also has good quality, that's considered Christian even by those standards, like Theocracy and, dare I say, last year's Testimony of Apocalypse, which that was good stuff. I don't know if the Metal Church in Nashville is going to appreciate this, outside of maybe the track Satan is a Bitch. But I'm not really entirely sure on if they're going to even play that in the church, depending on how they feel about the cussing. But it's very clear that, to me, if there is any form of Christianity, it's clearly very left-wing lenient. It's very much closer in line to Christian liberalism, or at least definitely liberalism in California. And given the punk and hardcore leniencies of DIY ethics this band seems to tend to have, I'd say even Christian anarchism. There's probably some other things I'm missing. And if you want better context before you see this review, I will recommend you a couple of reviews that have come out for this, more so from Thralls of Metal and The Metal Meltdown. Don't know if or when Middle Trenches will talk about it, or Mad Mike, if he will bother. He hasn't even done his... He got too busy doing his long-form video stuff. He forgot to do his Best of the Year stuff, and I would like to hear his Mad Mike's take on it, given his an atheist, former Catholic turned atheist, I guess. That'd been interesting. I have a friend who's technically former Catholic turned agnostic, and we had some fellow atheist friends around the town next door that I live around, and I'm basically part of the Archdiocese of St. Louis, or at least the deanery of my town is part of it, and I'm supposed to be, but offended. I'm more understanding in the sense of the album cover here, but which luckily it's far enough away. I think you can't make it out as much at this point. So, and also, if it's not very clear for a Christian metal band, the so-called Christian metal band, the one rule I usually have done, if you haven't figured out by now, I don't have to worry about doing, and that's the no cuss rule with those. And don't have to worry about that because this band don't do it. So, off the table, yay! Woohoo! Anyway, also my medals for those asking, or at least this one is I believe a St. Christopher, and then I have a Medjugorje and I believe a St. Joseph. My usual go-to is the dual St. Michael, Guardian Angel, and the Saint Cecilia, considered patron saint of music, and the frontman that claims himself goes by Saint Anthony. The album itself has like a bunch of like Hail Christ sermon things. One of them you've heard is essentially the Hail Christ 1. The intro, I'm guessing, on here may as well be Hail Christ 3, technically, because there's a 1, a 2 near the end, a 4, and a 5. But there's no 3. I'm guessing the intro is 3. They just didn't give the numeral for 3 on it like they did the other stuff. And it's very much a commentary on dealing with that and all the bullshit and going on. Like, do you want to go to heaven? This whole idea of it. It doesn't. These guys don't fuck around though. It's very. They make their message very to the point and to the clear, very clear. And the style of music they play, if I haven't made it clear, is very much Mr. Bungle worship. Or at the very least Mike Patton worship in more recent memory of the past couple Dead Cross albums. How some of the liberal lenient tendencies of the Dead Cross record, I wouldn't be surprised if they are for, especially the whole thing. I'm sure they're probably for it. No, not. I don't know how they feel about that whole Supreme Court situation on their end. But it is clear they're somewhat liberal because they've said, even in an interview, they've kind of made it pretty clear, even in one interview, that he's very much into the Bibles. They've basically bothered to burn some of them. I'm hoping none of them were Catholic Bibles. But knowing their choice of shock rocking that conceptually in how they're handling this, very in that GG line, and dare I say also from Innovative Cunt. That's name escapes me. That shouldn't be escaping me because there's a really good documentary from Mad Mike on him, and anal cut in general. But yeah. But if that front man, was less about just being hateful towards everything and just more specifically against what has become of a lot of the overrun ideas of Christian conservatism that's a little too alt-right lenient, I guess you would say, or at least too far right in that conservative lane, which I'm not. If I am, I'd like to, I'm more Christian centrist, leaning towards moderately conservative, but in a way that I'm still able to have some, but moderate in the sense I do have some liberalish tendencies, but I'm not, as some people would use the phrase, libtarded. There is a time and a place to use that phrase, and I feel it's more for those that are actually being regressive towards society and morality in general, and not progressive, like not knowing the difference. And I feel like that's an issue there with a lot of this, and issue there with some things they've mentioned. Some, like, I mean, they even say in here, do you want to go to heaven, you little bitch? Like, and then baptized in piss and shit. Like how basically every one that's been in all these other churches that isn't there, they may as well have been, that have been baptized in piss and shit because of how corrupt some of the people within the higher ups have basically been. And that we need this idea of bring back the guillotine, the idea of the prosperity preacher. The songs are very short and sweet, and then Tithe or Die has a really good solo on it. It's very tasty. The riffs are really good, but I understand it being a very busy record that it keeps it from. Plus, there's not very many bands that have of Mr. Bungle worship that would be able to be considered Christian metal, and they're one of the few that could technically have found a way to pull that off, even for being considered as grindcore and power violence, which isn't my thing. I don't really even think I would call this even that. I mean, in terms of its shock value, I guess it would be, but for the most part, it's really, like I said, it's more Silver Death Thrash in that Dead Cross, Wrath of the Easter Bunny re-recorded project for Mr. Bungle when they made their comeback. That involves Scotty Ian and also, ironically, like Dead Cross, Dave Lombardo. So, but this is, and that's influence is very clear. Apparently there's some other bands from like those earlier crossover thrash. Hell, there's some crust punk, I guess you could say, a little bit. Influences, I guess, which is the root of most of, and D-beat, that usually is the root of what eventually would become grindcore, yet alone to some degree power violence. Or at least in terms of some of the crunch of the guitars is somewhat crusty in its own right. Or at least somewhat for the production. Though I love the way this is produced compared to like some of the stuff that is of, though for the Dead Cross and the Wrath of the Easter Bunny, I feel like it's more closer to the Wrath of the Easter Bunny and the early 90s Mr. Bungle stuff, production-wise. Not so much anything Mark Patton's done since he's focused more on his own label with IPAC and stuff, which can be an issue. It kind of affected Faith No More in some extent, some of Tomahawk, but it's not the case with this musically here. I do think the music does speak for itself. It's actually pretty good, and I understand why some of the metal community is kind of praising this in its own right. And given some people that are possibly Satanists that were in the crowds, they made it clear they're actually but And as far as like the whole God hates, which is like I said with the whole God hates cops thing, then there's Jesus is a big old cock, got a big old cock, and I'm immediately the idea of this track and even and whatnot is very and even yes they do whisper that Jesus got a big old cock, Jesus got a big old cock. It's like this, just like you can't not help but kind of giggle and show you have a little dark sense of humor in your own fucked up right because of your fucked up friends that are atheists and shit and blah 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 blah, possibly goth in some cases with some people. But yeah, the and then there's also crazy. The God Made Me Do It, which is a commentary on all these people that are so in that certain vein of that particular one film that the late great Bill Paxton did years ago. That also starred Matthew McConaughey in the 2000s. That's I'm trying to remember the name of the movie, but it was that particular commentary on how people believe to where they're willing to kill people and stuff like that, and using the phrase of God made me do it as their thing. And there is some interesting, almost like moments in the way they handle that kind of ideologies and stuff, and bring in this clearly sort of almost demonic underbelly in some of the vocal tones, especially more noticeably during St. Anthony's sermon, though the things that are said in this sermon is exactly some of the things he said in interviews on his thoughts on the current state of Christianity in general, whether it be Catholicism, Protestantism, whether it be the typical or the more radical Reformation. So you could say their style of Christianity is definitely radical in comparison. Satan is a bitch. At least we can, no matter which side you're on about this. Yeah, Satan is a bitch. We can all agree on that. We might be one of the few times we were allowed to say that, and then like Jesus. I think Make Them All Dead and yes, there's a track called God Bless the Rapist, but you got to really understand the layers, what they're actually commenting on, in the sense that they basically all, and more specifically on the issue that has been happening within the Catholic Church because of what happened in '99 that needed to be addressed, or at least was more even further back to like the Jehovah's Witnesses situation. Nation that never got properly resolved, and there's still some of that shit going on. That even a big reviewer I go to for movies, Chris Stuckman, has talked about and had to openly talk about like a couple years ago. That he was a former for that reason. He tried to keep that away just in case for people that liked his stuff, I guess. And overall, I can't not, despite the way they go about the messages, and I understand it's meant for shock value, to genuinely piss off some of those particular people. But I think it's more those people that don't, and I get there is like a satirical element to it up to a point, but it's more just trying to literally take the piss out of Christianity, and through his interviews, and even they apparently opened for like a lot of big death metal acts, like in Possessed. Hell, they opened for Gwar in October of last year, and they've said in this interview on Metal Philosophy, through the Metal Philosophy, that when they opened for opening for Gwar, that apparently from him and them and their team, they told him to tone it down a notch. Their response, but you're Gwar. So yeah, like it's more, I think, they're telling them not to show them the fuck up as the opening act, but because given what they're dealing with, it was going to be a tough sell to follow it. Like the way Knock Loose did for Gojira a couple years back, which led to Gojira probably kind of screwing over Lorna Shore when they opened for them in Macedon. Though it worked and benefited Gojira because they sounded even better than the last show. So, but blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I know this is a long video review, and I was hoping for this to be a little bit more in depth about this. And if you want something a little better, more in depth, I would go to the interviews from Metal Underground and that Kamer Metal Underground and Metal Philosophy. And for those curious, there is a baptism that he does where he literally has a crucifix and is baptizing them. But it's some black murky water and stuff, so it's kind of sketchy-ish still. But, I mean, they are baptizing in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, which by Catholic standards, from what I'm told to an extent from even those that were Baptists that converted over, you can kind of skip baptism in terms of the sacrament and be able to get to the other stuff that you probably weren't able to do in your other belief or other form of belief through Protestantism, more so or less. Though if you probably were already through like a more schismatic church, chances are that's an easier transition. Hell, what we need to do, and I'd love to try to go more in depth with this whole situation. Overall, the music itself, I can't help but I'm. You can say you want to take my card away, but hell, I even got this during a Steubenville thing, and this shirt, and figured it'd be somewhat appropriate, at the very least, to have two guitars cross and all that. That'd be kind of cool for metal, And plus the whole metal horns thing, at least what Ronnie James Dio's plan was to initially use it was based off a superstition from a nun, and how that was essentially, it was supposedly, like, there's a certain stigma to it in Italy about it, but there was a certain way that he went about it, that it was actually, his intent was to protect, was to use as an evil eye towards demons in a similar way that gargoyle statues around more Gothic cathedral-looking churches would be for like stuff like that. And so my intent is the same as what Ronnie James Dio's would be. It's between the typical rock on and then the more meant to protect, put a seal of protection to thwart off demons and stuff, which is neat. A neat little thing for some of you. Yeah. I was trying to do my best about getting through religious, and I didn't exactly get as in depth, and I'm sorry. That's why I attempted to, and that's why this video is as long as it is. But I plan on wanting to do an even longer type of video, long-form video, on this particular album. There is still a lot to say. I just may not have articulated it as well. And if the band Cancer Christ is seeing this, I apologize to you guys, but and I do approve of at least relying on the crucifix and baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but don't know if you needed to do with some other nuances like holy water, like holy oil through the water or something to make it less, because you may as well just be doing the same exact thing and baptizing them literally in piss and shit. But even though I think the murky water might have had more, I don't think it was I don't know if it was genuinely that dirty, or if it was really more the black goop is probably from all the people that were face makeup that were true occult must have just rubbed off into the water, and if a kiddie pool thing, it's kind of weird but interesting. And the only thing about it is I'm curious I may eventually, when I get this uploaded, send this to some friends and talk about it and see what their thoughts are, and if and anyone who knows me and sees this and is open to having a discussion involving this record and possibly the idea of how far is too far in terms of evangelizing the faith, I can understand this being a certain level of that extreme. Um, I'm though it surprisingly seems from what I've seen from in the aftermath of stuff like that that it's actually kind of worked weirdly enough. And if it does lead to people to go to the church in a good way and hopefully lead to this certain particular better mentality, the thing about this record is to me is I like this record in the sense that I can look at this throughout the rest of this year as finally having an album that can be a reminder to not be the things that has been said here that they are satire they're somewhat satiring against. Um, that has become an issue. I'd love to believe that we are all Christians by our love, not by our hate. And yes, their choice of going a little more Old Testament and fighting fire with fire may not always be the best choice to do that in terms of evangelizing, but it's kind of, I guess it seems to have kind of worked in some cases. So with some of them, because I guess they sort of may have converted the interviewer and the camera lady, girl that was the girlfriend or whatever, in the Metal Underground interview, but I don't know. Wichita's Metal was still at that same exact concert that took place. I don't know if they got baptized or not. That'd have been interesting. I don't think they did, given what they talk, how they talked in their interview, but 50-50. You can't win them all, you know. But I'm not quite fully for it. I mean, there's a better way to go about it, but I wouldn't say it's as seemingly nearly as effective as the way they may be. Kind of. It's a toss up 50-50. I will say that regardless of the message, how the message is perceived, and the clear shock that it's going to be on most people leaning towards Christian nationalism, yet alone Christian conservatism, or conservative Christianity per se, modern conservative Christianity that seems to be almost borderlining alt-right at some points. Yeah. I mean, it's a good slap in the face that maybe y'all do need to wake the fuck up and, learn to, actually learn from Jesus' commandments of love one another as I have loved you and not be hateful fucking zealots and bigots and all these and corrupt and or just straight up corrupt piece of shit. Be a good fucking human being, not a complete and total piece of fucking shit, which is basically the main message I kind of got out of this. And I hope most people get out of this instead of just letting the shock just completely overwhelm you. And if you did, then you don't get what this thing is. So that's at least where I'm coming from with this, or at least I'm hoping that by the time you get to this point in the video, you've realized that or something. If you've at least had a chance to listen to this thing, it's only like 20-something minutes. It's not even 30, but it knows what it is, gets the fuck going, doesn't fuck around, and gets the fuck out. Hell, they even do a weird thing at the end of the sermon of the St. Anthony sermon that's like a kind of a masking thing for on purpose for extra shock value, I guess, and to like also kind of throw shade at that whole satanic panic bullshit, even more so given the fact that stuff would have made more sense given the whole black metal thing that came around sometime shortly after that so-called satanic panic bullshit. But anyways, I just forgot to get my overall. I understand why some of those reviewers are giving this as glowing praise musically for what this is and for the balls, sheer fucking massive balls that this album has, and for being the kind of controversy that it's going to take. That, or at least to some people who have heard about this band, seen what they did live, and even listened to this record for that matter, and their belief, at least from what I gather, their beliefs is considered Christian liberalism, a mix of Christian liberalism, possibly anarchism, in terms of at least going a very Old Testament in terms of preaching the word of God, I guess, or at least satiring the ones that, abuse and misuse it for their own personal gain, which is bullshit, and I'm definitely not for that either. I can't say I'm completely against cops entirely because I do have a relative who is one at this point. And so far, he's not corrupt. So, at the very least, thoughts and prayers. But yes, they like to take action. Little less talk, more action kind of a thing. And I understand that. And there are ways to do that in a healthier manner that doesn't result in going violent to do it. But, I mean, the healthier manner of, playing the music that they do and allowing those people to get that out in the pit without hopefully hurting people and at least being able to care for the fellow man that has gotten hurt in the pit, which is what you should do. But for me, this record gets a horns up. It's definitely, it's a, like, I'm going to say it, it does get a light to strong horns up for what it is, or at least it hits my niche and choice aspect, since I do myself like Mr. Bungle and Faith No More. I wouldn't say they're as experimental per se musically as much, but like I said, if you liked the recent stuff of Dead Cross, but better production, honestly, oddly enough. Yeah, definitely, give this, and if you have some friends who aren't, see what they think, and if they're more willing to have an open mind about it and see past the clear shock rock value bullshit that's going on and see what they're actually trying to say, and learn to not be the things they're basically bitching about. And just be a good dude. I mean, even he says in some of his interviews, just be a good person, man. Don't be a corrupt piece of shit. And, that's, I mean, they definitely get it across in a very fucked up way, but, I mean, that's, I guess, for being considered grindcore power violence, that's kind of grindcore power violence for you. But you know what? Sorry for this long, very, very long episode, but this gave me something to kind of talk about. Whether or not I've went in circles about it is an entirely different story. But what did you guys think of Cancer Crisis God is Violence? If you had a chance to listen to it, are you willing to listen to it? Are you willing to keep somewhat of an open mind, but, know that, to not be the things they're talking about, that kind of piece of shit, corrupt, and just, be good to your fellow man, show respect, show gratitude, show some sense of good restraint, or at least a little better than what comes across here. And just take the piss out of all of it, and don't give Jesus a reason to have what this on this cover happens, please. It's like a weird Old Testament version of what he essentially was trying to do in the Garden of Gethsemane, if you think about it. Except he didn't have the, gun to be able to deal with that stuff. But what did you think? What do you think of my idea of getting some friends together that are religious, non-religious, that have their thoughts on Christianity in general, and how far is too far with evangelizing, and if I should have an open table discussion involving this? I'm curious if I should. I'd like to, if I do, I'd like to at least do it sometime within this year. Ballparking it, and if that don't happen, it's kind of a little too late. But let me know in the comments below if y'all feel like I need to. What few of you that do respond in the comments. Well, even the band, would you like to see that as well? Mr. St. Anthony and the rest of y'all Snake Boys and all that stuff, or Snake People. Hell, they're even for, not being mean to people that are gay, or they're definitely more, apparently they were also considered pro-LGBTQ+, which is definitely a very liberal thing. Hell, it makes me wonder what they think of what the current state of Jars of Clay is at this point, since they were kind of very pro-LGBTQ and they got kicked out and not even promoted anymore, their music for that reason, which is shows how very conservative Christian lenient the Christian music industry is, and yet somehow there's some of that kind of bullshit that's going on in there that they even bitch about, you know, and which I would check out. Become the Knight's little documentary he created for involving the Christian music industry, behind the scenes stuff. That's also interesting as well. But yeah, again, leave a comment below, let me know, and as always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video, which I believe should be the new Caligula's horse, and then I'm going to eventually do a January catch-up, and then I'm also planning on posting. I just went through most of the Static X stuff, minus the Project Regeneration. I'm not going to even count that for what I'm about to do with the posts I'm going to really leave up for Static X. This is new stuff. But yeah, that's my plans for the channel right now. So yeah. And until those things happen, take care, y'all.